Rakesh is going to talk to us about how organizations can explore, exploit, and benefit from the disorder that we all witness every day. Thanks for being here.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I know it's a very difficult time post-lunch and already some great sessions since yesterday afternoon, so I'll just try to keep it brief but very specific. I think just one question I was raising my hands on rather in the previous panel to talk about also on the funding. We actually did something interesting. We're a bootstrapped organization and there are a lot of investor community behind us, following us other way around by saying we want to fund you, we are saying no. And we are going after customer funding. And very interestingly, we worked in terms of customer funding where we have derived the value for the customer, advanced some of the value delivery which we committed to them after 2 years, 3 years, advanced it, worked collaboratively and driven those optimization where they got benefited and their bottom line was better as well as our bottom line was better because we were not having the cost of funds. Coming to the specific point today, I just want to talk about something on the interesting topic, the power of escape velocity and the journey towards the anti-fragility. Since yesterday evening, we have been talking about anti-fragility. I just want to just take a quick view from the people sitting here. All of you are great leaders. How many of you, by a show of hand, can share you believe your organization is fragile? How many of you believe your organization is resilient? A few more hands going up. How many of you believe your organization is anti-fragile? Okay. So I think it's a good topic to discuss and rather no doubt. I think yes, absolutely. But I think there was a hand here. It will be helpful to understand if you can just throw one or two words because of which you think your organization is anti-fragile. You opted. I think there was a hand. Joydeep was raising his hand for the anti-fragility. So I think I just wanted to check. What was the reason you think your organization is anti-fragile? Any word which comes in your mind?
When the pandemic hit us, whichever CFO session I attended, everybody was down in the dumps. They would say, oh, it took us 2 months, or we recovered, but it took us 1 week, or it took us 2 days, or sorry, not 2 days, 1 month or 6 months to recover. And I would say, why does it take 1 month, 6 months to recover? Nothing should, in my case, nothing changed. We went from 100% work from office to work from home in 1 day.
Right.
So, just as an example, one small example of anti-fragility.
No, good point. I think readiness to continue the operation was very much there. I think it's a very good point. I just wanted to talk about a term which I coined recently in one of the events called ocean change. We all talk about sea change. I think this pandemic and many of these disorders will be, it's all triggering from this ocean change in terms of spread, intensity, reach, not just about the business, not just about the society, individuals, how much it has impacted. In our families it has impacted, right? So that ocean change brought a lot of disorders. And actually I was having a very different slide. Let me just share honestly, I changed this slide just before the lunch because I wanted to bring those specific terms which I have been hearing since yesterday evening instead of putting a lot of disorders which are like big buckets, etc. I think even Ramesh yesterday talked about from Happy the macro impacts, the micro impacts, and a lot of other areas. Many of these disorders I have been hearing since yesterday, and I'm sure many of you would be able to relate with it. The point is that turbulence. Another question, I'm sure all of us would have traveled primarily to this location in aircraft, right? And all of us would have experienced turbulence once in a while. How many of you, please raise your hands, enjoyed the turbulence instead of saying Bhagwan, Bhagwan, bacha lo is bar? You enjoyed the turbulence? Second time, okay, not bad. Anybody else who enjoyed the turbulence? Who said, okay, let me explore the turbulence? Used to explore it, okay.
25 years.
Oh, not bad, still.
Actually,
Less turbulence, less flights, less turbulence. Anybody else who said, okay, let me explore this turbulence. Maza aa raha hai, kitna maza aa raha hai turbulence hai air mein. Anybody tried that? No, we don't do that, right? Anybody said, okay, let me exploit this turbulence. I'll make the best out of it. Now I'm playing a game and I can, I'm playing this game where I can have my mobile switched automatically like this and I'll be able to get a best advantage of my speed of the car, racing, whatever it is. Anybody tried doing that? It does not come in our mind, naturally. First things comes in our mind is, let me just be stable, sustain, right? And that's where we lose the power of anti-fragility. And that's the first step of the anti-fragility, where you start exploring and then saying, I will exploit the turbulence. So turbulence is there. Let me start exploring it. Let me start exploiting it. Again, this disorders, I wanted to give a chart in terms of how to look at this anti-fragility for the organization. If somebody has to say how fragile or anti-fragile or resilient we are as an organization, if I have to say. There's a y-axis and x-axis. Y-axis is strengths and x-axis is stress. All sorts of organization will have the similar kind of a strength, if I have to say. But when the disorder comes, the tipping point, and the stress starts coming in, how much you are able to absorb that stress makes you a fragile, resilient, or anti-fragile. Fragile organization are like glass. Glass, they'll break. Because they got a stress and they will break. And many examples I have also quoted there. Resilient organization, they will have a dip. They will have some challenges. But they are like able to quickly bounce back to sustain, survive and continue. Like rubber. When you drop it, they'll bounce back. So they are resilient. And many of us are resilient. We have been proud to be resilient by saying when the work from home happened, we were first to do this. When this telecom thing happened, we were the first to do that. I mean, this is very powerful. We were resilient. The anti-fragile organization, when that drop happens, they absorb that shock, just not sustain, but they thrive during that shock. They come out with something which is unique and next to leap a growth. And there are many examples. Take examples like Swiggy, we all use it. And the difference, mind you guys, here is being lucky, being right place, right time, is not anti-fragility. It's about being prepared for it. I'll give you an example of Zoom. We all have used it, right? I'll share a metric. Zoom before pandemic was having 10 million subscribers. 10 million subscribers. Within 4 months of the pandemic, they had 200 million subscribers. 200 million subscribers from a 10 million. Can that be luck? This is about that readiness. And I'll talk about, and I'll share some thoughts in terms of how to be ready about that. But that's about the readiness to really move from a fragile to a resilient to an anti-fragile organization. Anti-fragility also demands, it loves for that volatility. We do a lot of volatility tests in IT. I've not heard people in finance fraternity saying, I want to do a volatility test of my processes. They want to audit. They don't do a volatility test of your processes. In IT, it happens. Right? So a lot of this opportunity is interestingly, and there's another term which I want to talk about is large-scale organizations are tending to be fragile because they're creating a lot of rigidity. And a lot of startups, they come with anti-fragility because they're ready to take decisions. They're ready to take and thrive on those challenges. Sometimes they also, once they become large, they also tend to become rigid. I give you example of a day one mentality. Many of you will be aware of day one mentality or day one culture. Jeff Bezos talked about in Amazon called day one mentality, where every day is the day one of the company, day one for the promoter, day one for the leaders, day one for the employees, day one for the way I treat my customer, day one in terms of agility of decision making, the day one in terms of the experience. Actually, he talks about not customer experience, he talks about customer obsession. So the day one, that makes a huge difference to become an anti-fragile organization. There are 3 levels in which this entire anti-fragility happens. The 3 circles as you can see here in the chart. There's a component level, there's the entire systems and the process level, and then finally the business model level. And I'm not using the term individuals. Components could be multiple things. Again, not to generalize that the people, our team is not critical, but we have been talking in the beginning, in the morning also about gig economies, gig workers, etc. Today it is very critical, and I can give example back to you about the Zoom. They had that readiness to embrace that kind of scaling up because they had looked at what they call as infrastructure as a services. They had that capability in terms of software as a services, and today it's all about transformation capability as a service, business process as a service. So where you create that balance of what you need to keep with you and your own people versus what kind of another service you can create for scaling it up as a component. The component word also comes from the component business of automobile, where it's all about assembling it together. So finally, many of the major car makers, luxury car makers, I'll not name them, you will know about it, they finally just put their stamp. Rest everything comes from different parts, different places. So that component thing also makes them more prepared to take any shocks. Second one is a process and systems. And I use the term MD, right? It's not managing directors. It's not managing directors. Master of disasters. The guy, it's like MC we talk about, right? Master of ceremonies. Somebody has to be master of disaster, who has to create those disasters. Actually, I use another term called CM, which is not chief minister. So nothing political about it, but somebody who creates chaos. So I call it chaos monkeys, who are people who are challenging the processes and system by saying, why you have it? I can give you example. We've been talking about since yesterday about Zen Z, etc., where the expectation of the Zen Z, and I said something on the expense management. Today their expectation is, I have spent money here and it should be in my bank like this. So either yahan pay kiya, there should be a ting in my mobile saying my reimbursed. Think about you guys. How many of you have achieved it? I can tell you the survey says many of the Indian corporations particularly have a process where it takes 2 days to even submit your reimbursement slips. The entire thing automated, etc. Then finally 4 layers of approval. It's not about technology, it's about the process that you have. And the 4 levels of approval, the level 1 guy approves thinking the next 3 layers will take care of it. The level 2, 3, 4 thinks L1 has already approved it, so theek hi hoga. So no one is actually reviewing it. I'm generalizing a statement to make a point, but that's the way it is, isn't it? So that's the way the processes and the systems has to be challenged if you really want to move to an anti-fragility. And the last one, but very critical one, is this business model itself. The portfolio diversification. Have you guys noticed that Apple has always, whenever there's a recession or whenever there's a dip in terms of economic stability, either due to the pandemic, has always come back more stronger in terms of their top line, bottom line? One metric which has always made them go stronger is the top line, bottom line. While their main products, we always believed like mobile, iPhones, was losing in market in the pandemic time because the entire stores were closed. All stores were closed. But they had the portfolio diversification in such a way that the other products, like your online store, products like iTunes, Apple TV, they were all bringing them the profitability and the top line. So that portfolio diversification managed or enabled them to remain the number one, as well as ultimately achieve that top line, bottom line growth, despite one of their major flagship product having an impact. And similarly, it happened with another product of theirs as well. So I think this 3 combination of the rings is very, very critical. I will repeat, it's a component mindset, looking at challenging those systems and processes by being chaos monkeys or MDs, master of disasters, and then looking at this entire business model portfolio diversification. And it is contextual for each organization. Now take me to the moon. I want to take you guys to the moon. We all want to go to moon, right? Mars, okay, not bad. But you did Mangalyaan for it, which also carries human, which can ferry human. We want to go to moon or Mars, right? How many of you have heard this term escape velocity? Kindly raise your hands. Escape velocity is a velocity at which the rocket gains the momentum to go out of the gravitational pull of the earth. Can you guess what kind of a speed which is required by a rocket to go out of the gravitational pull? It requires 11.2 kilometers per second, which is like 4,000 kilometers per hour. आपकी गाड़ी चलेगी? 4,000 kilometers per hour, right? So that's a kind of a velocity or the momentum it requires to go out of the gravitational pull. Jeffrey Moore, actually this Taleb talked about antifragility in 2008/9 in his book. A lot of work has happened on the antifragility. But Jeffrey Moore talked about power of escape velocity in 2019. And actually our organization came out of that power of escape velocity and antifragility. So it's an interesting organization I was talking about. While doing a lot of things for 2.5 decades, finally we came out thanks to the escape velocity. I'll just talk about how you achieve this escape velocity. And then also I'll talk about some of the mindset which requires to drive that change. The first thing first is, what is the gravitational pull in the business context? Your past, your legacy, your traditions. ये ऐसे नहीं होता मेरे यहाँ पे. This will not work in my organization. That will not work. That past pulls you down. And once you free up your company's future from that past, what you do is you cross the chasm. And then, once you have already thought of that, you have crossed the chasm, now what is required is to create that momentum, create that force, that 11.2 kilometers per second kind of a force for the future, not for the present, to drive that escape velocity. And once you start doing that, what you do, you create tornadoes. You create tornadoes. It is not external tornadoes. So you get into a tornado. And from there, when the power surplus is there in the organization, it starts breaking you free from the past of your organization. It starts making you achieve that escape velocity. That's a shift which happens here from the company perspective. I just want to give you two interesting examples of anti-fragility and escape velocity. Two people, I'm sure you would have heard of a lot about them. One is a star cricket player, Yuvraj Singh. Anybody who is not aware of Yuvraj Singh, I can spend a few minutes with him. I love cricket passionately. So, somebody wants a session with me on Yuvraj Singh, I'll be very happy to do that. So Yuvraj Singh, we all know, he was battling with cancer in 2011. Right? And he was just not resilient. He was just not saying, I will play the World Cup. He was anti-fragile. He thrived during that period. He was the man of the series. He got the World Cup for us. So he was just not sustaining. He was not resilient. He actually became anti-fragile. I'll give you another interesting example. I'm sure many of you heard of the story. There's a lady by the name Arunima Sinha. She's a Padma Shri now. She was an 8-time national volleyball player. I know her personally very well. She was supposed to be an international player on volleyball. She was traveling in a train. Robbers threw her out from the moving train. She lost her leg. She became an amputee. And she had two choices: to be bedridden, of course living on whatever charity, etc., or do something back. She also realized she can't play volleyballs now. Volleyballs require a very different kind of thing. So she has to find doing something else. She went to Bachendri Pal and said, okay, what? I want to climb Mount Everest with her clutches on. Bachendri Pal said, what are you talking about? You want to walk up the Mount Everest with your amputated leg? She said, why not? I want to do that. And then she started a mission of saying, I want to climb all the continent's highest peak. And she did it. She's the first female amputee to climb Mount Everest. It was all anti-fragility. It is not resilience. What I'm trying to bring out here is this is the power of escape velocity. When you go out of a gravitational pull by saying, oh, how can I do it? I have not been able to do it. No one has done that. This is something which is difficult. Lot of money will be required for me to do this training. Who will fund me, etc., etc. We are a startup. We can't do it. You get into that gravitational pull. And that is where the power of escape velocity comes in, where you can make the difference by achieving that anti-fragility. And these people have done that. I wanted to share some mindsets from an organization point of view. Actually, typically the question for all of us here as a leader is what we should do differently. what we can, bring into the organizations to make the difference, right? So this is a question which comes in my mind. I talk about 4 mindsets. There are 4 mindsets which really enables you to achieve escape velocity. And very simple. The first mindset is enterprise mindset. This is not my process mindset, function mindset, it's enterprise mindset. One interesting metric which you also saw in one of the slides, if I can just go back to share with you. If you see here, we're talking about to go to the Mars or Moon, it requires exponential capabilities, not incremental capabilities. Not incremental capabilities. So if you're looking at 10% growth in your budget, and you're looking at 10% of investment into your current performance, you will not be able to achieve escape velocity. You are still funding your performance. You're still funding current today. You are not funding into your future. You are not investing into your future. If you really want a 10x growth, you have to fund your future, not the current performance. You will fund your current performance. You will stick to your achievement of your current performance, but not be ready for the future. From 10 million of Zoom subscriber to 200 million of Zoom subscriber was not because they were funding into their performance today. That's scalability. So to get that exponential capability, the first mindset is enterprise mindset, where you should very clearly say, I want to go beyond this performance mindset to this growth mindset. Very clearly not looking at this 10%, but looking at this 10x growth. If you challenge that by saying, I want to do a 10x, I give an example from levers. Nitin Paranjape said once, everybody was in the budget meeting expecting me to talk about 50 mil, 60 mil as a target on a specific product. He said, okay, the entire management team thought we'll do 60 mil, it's good enough. Maybe the MD will come and talk. CFO has already stretched 5% from 50 to 55 mil or 60 mil. He will come, maximum will talk about 65 mil. We'll all crib that how 65 mil is possible. Last year was 30 mil, very difficult, etc., etc. He came in the meeting, he said the target for you guys is 500 mil. Now, negotiate kar lo. 500 mil mein aap kya negotiate karoge? 50, 55 to 30, 35, you can do that, right? Your businesses can still talk. With 500 mil, what will you negotiate? He said very clear, it's 500 mil, let's do that, 10x. And they ended up achieving 320 mil on that product line. So think about it, the 320 mil they got, what if the target was 60 mil, they would have never got it. So 10x mindset is very, very critical to shift beyond the functions, to connect the entire end-to-end and the organization, very critical. I was talking about, a lot of people talk about my resilience. My processes are very robust. What processes are you talking about? Which processes are you talking about? You're talking about accounts payable processes. You're talking about receivables processes. Where are you talking about end-to-end of the organizational processes? Take one business process stream, end-to-end, and tell me, is it robust? They tend to be fragile. And because the process is fragile, your business process is fragile, your organization is fragile. One other point, I think we all talk about data analytics and digital and data combination for analytics. Very good, and analytics is very important. We believe analytics is good where you actually break everything into parts. But finally, there has to be, if you want to take again this escape velocity mindset, you need to synthesize multiple analytics. You bring it all together finally to look at one view rather having multiple dissected views of data analytics. Is very, very critical. The second one, the second mindset is an interesting one. We all know BAU, like business as usual. I'm not talking about business as usual. If you really want to drive the escape velocity, achieve antifragility, you need to have the second mindset after enterprise mindset is disruption as usual mindset, what I call as a DAU mindset. Here the disruptions are not created by others and you are reacting to it, but you are proactively creating those disruptions and driving those disruptions. It is about moving from a comfort zone to a discomfort zone where you are comfortable. And that becomes a very critical component again for driving this entire change. I think the vulnerability is another important point I want to talk about. This whole digitization, and I think there's interchangeably people use the term digitalization, and I think we have a framework and I can talk for hours in terms of digital quotient and how digitization is different than digitalization, etc., etc. But the simple point here is, are you doing it for the sake of, because everybody else is doing it? Are you doing it because it is available in the market? Are you doing it because you should not remain behind by others when you stand in the conferences like this and everybody is talking about machine learning and you say, oh, mujhe ko to pata nahi, I know only learning, I don't know machines. Right? Are you doing it for that purpose? You're making it a priority because of that reason. Or you are automating it because you want to do something. It's very critical when you are going after digitalization. The DAU mindset says that you should look at the areas of vulnerability. Look at the areas where the value can happen. The two components, the vulnerability and the value, the V and V, makes the disruption as usual meaningful in terms of digitalization point of view. The last one on here is visualize, strategize, and optimize. Many of you would have heard strategy, planning. We are into strategy meet. I think even Captain Raghu Raman was talking yesterday about, we'll go for all of this strategy meets, etc., planning, etc. Very critical. Planning is important. What is more important is, they say 95%, there's a McKinsey report which says that 95% of the economic profit is achieved by 20% of the organization. And how they do it is, the step one they look at is visualization, imagination, before they get into strategy. They start visualizing it. And once they visualize, then they start getting into by saying, how will I strategize it? Look beyond internally. Typically we say a strategic triangle kind of a thing, competitor, capabilities, which is company, and even my customer. Look at your partners, look at other available environment. How will you strategize it? And then finally, not leaving it there to really make it operational. There are a couple of statements I want to re-emphasize here before I move on to the next pages. Many times, I'm sure many of us would have used this term, I will reimagine my strategy. I'll reimagine my processes. Am I right? I want to emphasize, don't reimagine. If you reimagine, you still have a hangover of past. That's why reimagining it. It's a bold statement to make. Don't reimagine. Imagine. Wag your imagination. What is wag? We say wagging imagination. Wag imagination. It's all about gravity again. So you need to find out what are those actions which will take you away from that gravity, and then you drive that imagination. So wag your imagination and just not reimagine, because you always will have that baggage and hangover when you're reimagining your strategy or reimagining your things. The third mindset, I have a couple of minutes to finish, I'll finish it in time. So the third mindset is experience as a service mindset. I give you a classic example. I think the customer service mindset, customer centricity mindset, a lot have been talked about it. And I was talking about Amazon, where they don't talk about customer experience, they say customer obsession, right? And yesterday, Hemant and I was traveling from an airline, I'll not name it, and we were very frustrated. They are very popular for what they have achieved. They are excellent in terms of on-time services. They are excellent in terms of the way they manage everything. What they're losing is they make you not believe you're a customer. And if you're not believed to be a customer, that experience is poor, what will happen? Actually I can tell you at least two I know here, we have already said we don't want to travel in that airline going forward. And I'm sure many more, right? And many of us will start losing. So the company is going to lose, despite all the great things they're doing. So customer experience, so even you have a great product, finally you have a glass of whatever, that water bottle, a great product. The product is not what brings business and the anti-fragility to you. The experience brings the anti-fragility. At the end, you want to experience. I give you an example. You're buying a great phone, iPhone, but if the payment process was a challenge, you will have the experience which is not great. So one touch point can create a problem. I give you another example of touch points versus customer journey. People say, this entire, actually we don't look at sometimes the entire customer journey, the experience. We look at each touch point. More the touch point for a same customer in the journey, the chances of customer experience being low is much high. Let me take an example. If you have a 90% of customer achievement or satisfaction for a one touch point, and the second one is also 90, and the third is 90, and fourth is 90, and fifth, there are 5 touch points. Your customer journey experience is not 90%. It is 90 into 90 into 90. So you start every time 90 becomes 90%, another 90%, another 90%. By the fifth touch point happens, it comes down to about 60%. So your experience is about 60%, or maybe lower than that, 54%. Your CFOs, you can do a better mathematics than me. I think 5 touch points will make it 54%, I believe, with each 90%. So more the touch points, the better the bigger the challenge is. The last one in the mindset I want to talk about is entrepreneurial mindset. This entrepreneurial mindset is not about you have to become an entrepreneur and start a new venture and be a startup, etc., etc. It's within the organization you can cultivate that. I think yesterday Giri was talking about a very good point that each property has that ownership and the leader there to drive that experience. Find out how they will manage it, what kind of strategy they will have, etc., etc. So that problem solving abilities and empowerment at that level is about creating that entrepreneurial mindset. It's very, very critical to create that kind of a mindset to drive that. Of course, I think again 2 words Giri talked about yesterday was iconic and profitability. He said we were iconic, we wanted to be iconic, we added profitability. And I will say again here is simplicity with a very clearly agility, which is important. And the last one on this page and with my presentation here is talking about nurture your partnership. It's not about large company, small company. I think yesterday there was a question about can startups being seen differently, etc. I've been part of large corporates. We have disrupted large corporates. We have done work with $50 million company on a stream, on a $30 billion company, top 10 script on London Stock Exchange, working with both the kinds of organization. I've seen both have their own partner ecosystem. How you bring and nurture that partner ecosystem is very, very critical if you really want to drive that escape velocity. So 4 mindset, enterprise mindset, disruption as usual mindset, experience as a service mindset, and entrepreneurial mindset. This 4 will bring the difference and drive that escape velocity. You will get this 11.2 kilometer per second and achieve the anti-fragility. That's all from my side. Thank you guys. I think as I leave the stage, I want to say that you have to change. So just change, don't change gears. Change your vehicle. If you're traveling in a car, you have to find aircraft. You're traveling in aircraft, find rocket to get this 11.2 kilometer per second and have a different imagination altogether. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you.